Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, this tells me the tribulation is approaching in the very near future. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the rise of drone warfare and its absolute transformation of the battlefield. And guys, we're only in the earliest of the early stages. So let's take a look at this just to set some background. Well, we have obviously this recent story from earlier in the week when U.S. troops were killed and wounded in an attack in Jordan on the base where they were by a drone, a one-way drone attack. So we see the vulnerability that encampments have to these drones entering into the area. We also had late last week, as part of this ongoing campaign in the Red Sea to disrupt the shipping lanes of the Red Sea by the Houthis in Yemen, it says the United States Navy essentially lost a battle at sea. This was a little over a week ago. You had 3 heavily armed U.S. naval vessels trying to transport 2 container vessels that came under attack by drones and had to turn and leave the area. They fled. So we're seeing how drones are countering what in the past was considered massive conventional weapons advantages. We saw Hamas use drones as part of its October 7th attack. We've seen Israel use drones as their counteroffensive against Hamas. So we're seeing battlefields all over the world. Drones are taking a pivotal role. They're the number one weapon being used on the battlefield. Let's look at some examples from Russia, Ukraine, where we're definitely seeing this. So this is from the Daily Express. It says, crazy moment, Russian soldier is blown up playing a game of tag, as they put it, with a Ukrainian drone. The doomed soldier is seen doing laps around his tank before the drone finally catches up with him. There's videos of this if you want to watch it. We don't have enough time to watch those things there. Some of you may not want to watch the actual moment this explodes and kills the soldier, but if you care to look at those things, I'll provide these links in the description and pin them to the top of the comments. You can go look at it. But if you watch this video, what you'll see is you'll see this disabled tank and you'll see this Russian soldier, and he walks around the tank and he sees this drone following him. So here we have the soldier, here we have the drone right behind him. This drone has followed him from all the way around the tank. He's ducked under things, moving as fast as he can, and it catches him and it explodes. So he's being sought out by this drone. I mean, very much like science fiction movies. We also had this from Forbes. It says Russian troops sought shelter in a wrecked armored vehicle. An explosives-laden Ukrainian drone followed them in. And so here we have, this was another disabled vehicle. There was a doorway here. Several Russian soldiers entered this area because they saw this drone. And of course, the one taking this picture and taking this video, they could see that as well. But they went in there to hide, thinking they hadn't been seen, but they had been seen by the drone that took this picture. And then this drone, which was a munitions drone meant to explode, it went into the doorway, it explodes. Again, there's video of this and you see, dust blowing out of the sides, smoke coming out. None of the soldiers leave. So they were basically hunted by this drone. So, we have other instances like this. This one from Business Insider. Chilling video shows a doomed Russian soldier in a terrifying cat and mouse ordeal with a Ukrainian killer drone. We've seen Russian soldiers surrendering to drones. They spot the drone, they signal surrender, the drone leads them to where they can surrender to Ukrainian troops. So, as this is, again, dominating the battlefield, Here's an example, a first-hand account. This is from Newsweek. It says Russian soldier recounts FPV, that's first-person view. So these are essentially drones that are remote controlled, almost like a video game, from someone who could be really on the other side of the earth, but is probably miles away from where these things are taking place. It says he recounts first-person view assault with flock of drones led by a queen. So let's see what this says. This says, a Russian soldier has recounted the moment he saw an attack from Ukraine's first-person view drones, which have been hailed by Kiev as a game changer on the battlefield. This Russian serviceman was apparently a witness to a flock of Ukrainian FPV drones led by a repeater drone queen, which descended onto Russian positions and started bombing. He says a flock of around 10, the queen is somewhere above at a high altitude and a small detection range. It brings the flock of drones, click that off, it brings the flock of drones, which then descend onto positions and start working. Zimmerman said such a tactic would allow small drones to land and wait, saving batteries. So these can actually, they can either descend on a position very quickly, or they can ambush troops. They can lie in wait, preserving their power, and then activate once the queen, which is high above and has a view of this area, sees enemy targets in the area and then activates those. So he says when a large mother drone spots targets, the kamikazes take off, sometimes several meters from the target, and attack. If the queen is eliminated, then her entire flock can be neutralized. So let's keep that point in mind for a moment. So we're seeing the development of drone swarms now. We've seen these drones being used for some time in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But guys, seeing actual soldiers hunted down by these, it really is reminiscent of, if you remember this film, and again, I'll put a link to this in the description as well as pin it at the top of the comments, but it was called Slaughterbots, and it was put out by an advocacy group that is pushing for the ban of autonomous weapons, weapons that would make the decision to kill human beings. And so here we see in this frame, we see this plane flying overhead, and it's dropping just tens of thousands of these kamikaze drones out of the back onto, in this case, I think it was a city that they were going on to. But guys, this is where we're headed. We're going to see these develop into much more sophisticated swarms in the immediate future, in the months and years ahead, especially when there's ongoing conflicts where there is a huge advantage to be had for pushing that development. So let's take a look at some images of what some of those things could look like. So here we have a conceptual image of what we would traditionally think of as these drones that long range, they fly long distances, but we have just a swarm of these, an overwhelming swarm. Then we have some of these smaller drones, short range. These aren't going to fly miles and miles and miles, but again, if you have a mother ship, a queen that can drop a bunch of these into an area that does have long range capability, it can fly into the area, target area, and unload these. But we're going to see larger and larger swarms, and we're going to see more and more things like this, where here you have this jet drops this, it opens up, and the drones come off of it. You're going to see things like torpedoes that can be launched and come to the surface and open, and the drones fly out. You're going to see an enormous amount of creativity being used in the design of these weapons. But again, we've talked about at low cost, the design isn't necessarily going to be in the weapons themselves, the hardware. It's going to come in the software. It's going to come in the software that drives these, and artificial intelligence is going to be at the forefront of that. So what we're seeing right now, when we read that Russian soldier's account of this Queen drone that's high above the battlefield, and these other drones are released and they come down, they're kamikaze drones that can blow up at different targets. That's very, very early stage. And he said if you can neutralize that Queen, you take them all out because they all get their direction from that one piece of hardware. But guys, as we see these develop, that will go away. What we're going to see is a true swarm. A true swarm is decentralized, meaning there is no mothership or centralized control. In this case, they called it a queen. And you're going to have a whole lot more than, say, 50 of these things at once. You might have 5,000, 50,000. Think of swarms of bees, flocks of birds, and you can take out one and it will make no difference in the mission of the others. The others will simply, they'll adjust in flight to their target. They'll learn on the battlefield. And again, this is essential to understand. They're going to, as defensive measures are taken to defend against these attacks, AI is going to learn in real time what works and what doesn't, what directions to attack from, what countermeasures to use. Again, we've talked about when people have said, well, this is no big deal, you'll just use EMPs, right? You'll shoot this electromagnetic pulse and all those drones fall to the ground, no problem. And I would say, well, hey, why isn't that being used on the battlefield right now? But B, you have to have some sort of range on an EMP like that. You can't just send it out for 100 miles. If you did, you'd take out everything, including possibly some of your own things in the process. So you can't just indiscriminately blast EMP everywhere. So there has to be some sort of range. What is that? Is it 50 feet? Is it 50 yards? And again, once the swarms learn that, well, they'll simply stop short of that, and then they'll fire something that isn't impacted by that EMP. So guys, it's very, very difficult to defend against these things, and especially with conventional weapons, as we've noted in the Red Sea, where they're shooting down $20,000 drones with $1 or $2 million missiles. You cannot keep that up indefinitely. Who knows that you can even keep that up for a few months? It really depends on how many drone attacks you experience and what would happen. But again, all of this is the early stages of this. We're going to see much more sophisticated drone swarms. We're going to see much more powerful drones with different functions. They're going to be smaller. They're going, again, to be air, land, and sea-based. And they're eventually going to be manufactured in real time on the battlefield, so that even if some measure of defense is developed that can take out a swarm, there will be another swarm right behind it. So we've talked about in the past this replicator initiative that the Department of Defense started pushing back in August to be able to field hundreds or thousands of drones, land, air, and sea-based simultaneously. And we've talked about molecular manufacturing and how the breakthrough in that technology will allow for the low-cost manufacturing of pretty much anything in the physical world, which includes these drones, which means you could create enormous swarms of much, much more capable drones. When that moment happens, I believe that will be the end of mutual assured destruction, which is something I've been talking about for quite some time. We've seen that up to the level of weapons of mass destruction. So weapons of mass destruction, nuclear basically nuclear weapons is the only thing holding back all-out world war at this point. That won't last forever, but we've seen very clearly conventional weapons have lost their deterrent ability. So U.S. deterrence of deploying the U.S. Navy to a region like the Red Sea, in the past, post-World War II up until 2 months ago, that was good enough to end attacks like what we're seeing with the Houthi rebels in Yemen. It's no longer the case. Again, even though the U.S. Navy hasn't lost a ship to one of these attacks, how long could they continue to fire $1 million, $2 million missiles at each of these drone attacks? You could wipe out all U.S. munitions in a short amount of time if you have a large enough scale drone attack. And as we see swarms develop, that's exactly what we're going to see. So this technology with the swarms is exponentially, rapidly moving forward, whereas these conventional technologies that took years to develop, they aren't engaged in exponential change. So this really upsets the balance of power. It one day will end mutual assured destruction. It will make it obsolete. This is something I've been writing about for almost 25 years now. I've been pointing to this. Back then, I would point to this and say, well, off in the future, if Bible prophecy is not fulfilled, if these end times prophecies are not fulfilled in the near term by other means, then this is how we're going to see the world conquered. Because once that breakthrough in molecular manufacturing in particular takes place, but it will also be quantum computing and artificial intelligence that are playing pivotal roles in this. Once we see that critical breakthrough in molecular manufacturing, it will be incumbent upon whatever nation or nations achieves that to conquer the world and eliminate any ability of any possible competitor to develop their own. Otherwise, you end up with an unstable arms race for many of the reasons we just talked about. The continuous learning, the continuous change and development of these technologies would create great suspicion, volatility, and it would eventually erupt. Like, mutual assured destruction doesn't apply to these types of rapidly evolving technologies. And so whoever develops that will use it to conquer the world. We know the Antichrist does that exact thing. We read in the book of Revelation how the Antichrist rules over every people, nation, tribe, and language in the world. We read about how people say, who can make war against the beast? So guys, we're moving into that time period technologically now. We're here. It's no longer 25 years ago where we're saying, well, a couple of decades from now, things are really going to start to change. We're there now. How close we are to seeing that breakthrough, I don't know, but we're going to see swarms evolving, using AI. They're going to become much more sophisticated. We're going to see ground troops like what we're seeing just become obsolete because they're going to have no way to defend against these things. And eventually it'll just be swarms attacking swarms, or swarms attacking cities and civilians and who knows what. So this is a very dangerous time. It's a time of dramatic change, and I believe it is leading straight to the tribulation period. And when we see that critical breakthrough, that I don't think we'll necessarily be here as Christians. If you're a Bible-believing Christian, I believe the Bible teaches that the rapture of the church, Jesus coming back for his church, will occur before the tribulation period. But I believe the world will wake up one day and realize that this breakthrough has happened when it is used to conquer the world and establish a global empire. And once that happens, guys, well, these technologies will create something else that has to happen in order to preserve the peace. So it's not just other nations that have to be eliminated as competitors to whatever nation or group of nations develops these critical technologies, but it'll be individuals as well. Let's take a look at this article right here on Zero Hedge. All we have to do is read the headline. It says, is Alibaba selling kamikaze drones? So Alibaba is the equivalent of, say, Amazon in China. And anybody can go on there and buy a kamikaze drone. So as we see these technologies proliferate, and as we see them become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, far more sophisticated, you would have an enormous amount of power available to individuals, maybe mentally ill individuals, as we've seen what can happen with mass shootings and things of that nature, terrorist events. So imagine terrorists with the types of tools at their disposal that we just described. They could cause an unimaginable amount of destruction. So the state most certainly is going to be pointing to that and saying, well, we can't have that. So what we need is mass surveillance of the population to make sure that no one is doing anything like this. And of course, that capability will be there with the technologies we just talked about. Molecular manufacturing will enable high definition cameras, high definition audio feeds. So you'll have video and audio feeds as small as dust, as plentiful as dust all over the earth. It will be relatively inexpensive to create. It would happen very rapidly. All of that data gathered would be that you could use artificial intelligence to sift through that, pick out particular patterns, watch certain individuals, understand every conversation that's taking place, all that is happening. And again, if someone managed to create a clean space that kept this type of surveillance out, well, it would be a big blind spot that would be, it'd be like raising your hand and saying, hey, government, I'm over here. Come see why you don't see over here. So there will be no escape from this level of government surveillance that will exist in the very near future. And so think of that power that the government would have. Think of the Antichrist in control of technologies like that, with the ability not only to control who can buy and sell, as we read about with the mark of the beast, but would be able to hear everything, see everything, and in the eyes of the world, especially a deceived world, such an individual would seem to be all-knowing, all-seeing. They would take on the characteristics, or at least some of the characteristics we associate with God. And of course, we know the world, the fallen world, will worship the Antichrist as their God. So guys, all of this stuff is telling me the tribulation is approaching. Again, we're not talking decades into the future here, where we're going to see this drone warfare evolve into much smaller drones, much larger swarms, much smarter, intelligent, self-directed, autonomous swarms driven by artificial intelligence. We're going to see this develop over the coming months and years. With whatever time we have left here, we're just going to see this increase and increase in sophistication and in capability. So guys, again, all of this tells me we're coming to a time where technologically mutual assured destruction becomes obsolete. The leader in this field will use its technological advantage to conquer the globe. We don't read in the Bible that there's another global government that appears before the global government that is the last one, the revived Roman Empire ruled over by the Antichrist. So we would have to believe that that would be it. And again, maybe some other way of fulfilling these prophecies comes about before we see these technological breakthroughs. That's possible, but we're getting close to these technological breakthroughs. And one thing I'm certain of, if those things aren't, if the Bible prophecies are not fulfilled before we get to that point, then when we see these critical breakthroughs, they will play a pivotal role. They will be what we read about in the book of Revelation, because these technologies will be used to conquer the world, to govern the world, to surveil the world, to rule the world. And that means the Antichrist will be at the head of that global government. It will be the tribulation period. It means Jesus is coming back, because we know Jesus returns, the second coming of Christ. He returns at the end of the tribulation with all of the saints right behind him. So, guys, we're getting close. How close? I have no idea. I don't know a date. And if I told you that I did, I would be a liar, because the Bible says we can't know that. But Jesus said we can know the season. Jesus said, when you see all these things begin to take place, know that I am near. I'm right at the door. Your salvation draws near. Guys, we're beginning to see all the things Jesus and the prophets told us about. The Bible pointed to the times we're living in today, our generation, what we're seeing, and tells us to prepare, because Jesus is coming back. So let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. When you do that, when you hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons, these videos go out to more people. And I know, again, we've talked about this in the past, especially if you're on YouTube. You may have hit the subscribe button in the past. That doesn't mean you're subscribed now. Double check and make sure, because YouTube likes to suppress videos like this that are pointing out the truth to people, telling people what's going on. Because you've noticed our media narratives don't do that. Notice how the examples I had to use were of Russian soldiers being hunted down by Ukrainian drones. But the opposite is happening as well. But we won't read about that in Western media, right? They're not going to put that in there. But the exact opposite is happening. In fact, on a more regular basis, it's the Ukrainian soldiers fleeing those drone attacks. So, guys, leave your comments below. Hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And God willing, I will see you on Monday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.